What's up, everybody? Energy is Love Podcast. Thank you very much for going out on iTunes and subscribing. Hey, when you're on iTunes and you're listening to the show, whether it's through your phone or on your laptop, your Mac, whatever the case may be, make sure you rate us. Leave us a review. That's a great way to help the show build and expand and grow and reach more listeners. I also want to challenge everybody out there. Now, if you enjoy the show and you like what you're listening to, then the challenge is share it. Tell your friends, tell your family members, make a point to at least go out and tell somebody today about the Energy is Love podcast so that more people can find it, more people can listen to it. We can keep expanding and keep growing. Here we go with all the different things we got to talk about. First off, July 30th, Dancing Crane Import, Salt Lake City, Utah, 673 East Simpson Avenue. It is the 4th anniversary of the Soulworks Fair. Now, the Soulworks Fair is an amazing event that's been put on by Betty Pease. You guys heard Betty in our very first episode of the podcast. At this fair, you're going to find all sorts of things. You're going to have energy healers, card readers, past life readings, mediums, all sorts of different stuff, including all the amazing things that Dancing Crane has to offer as well. So it's a really good opportunity to come out and check everything out. That's going to be July 30th. The reason I bring it up is, hey, the podcast is going to be there. We're going to be there recording that day, chatting it up with everybody. So it's a good opportunity to come out. And if you'd like, be on the show yourself. We'd love to see our listeners, and we'd love to chat you guys up and have you on the show. Remember, that's July 30th, Dancing Crane Imports, Soulworks Fair. Zen Float Company, zenfloatco.com, the in-home float tent. First and foremost, it's an amazing experience in floating. Now it's practical to float in your home. $1,850 for your own in-home float tent at Zen Float Co. Lay back and relax. It's an amazing experience. Go check it out, guys. There's a link on our Facebook page, Energy is Love Podcast, and you'll see right at the top, Zen Float Co. Click on that link. Go buy your tent. When you check out, enter the promo code, Energy is Love, and you get a free pair of underwater headphones. Can't beat that. That's a great deal. Listen to the podcast while you float in your amazing Zen Float Co. tent of wonder. We also have to thank Crystal Water Float Spa for sponsoring the podcast. We record all of our episodes out at Crystal Water Float. It's an amazing place. It's a wonderful space. Steph and I, we also do all of our energy work there. We see our clients there. It's a wonderful space. Check them out online at crystalwaterfloat.com or go to their Facebook page, Crystal Water Float Spa. Crystal Water has the amazing dream pod for you to float in. And that, my friends, my listeners, the universe, that is an incredible experience. So go check them out. Like I said, if you live in the area, by all means, come swing in. Pop in and say hi. Come float. You'll love it. On today's show, I had the wonderful opportunity to chat with Dr. Mary Wingo. Mary lives in Ecuador, actually, so this is a first for the podcast where we got to hook it up and connect and chat online, and you guys get to enjoy it. Mary wrote a book recently titled The Impact of the Human Stress Response. She is an incredible woman who discusses in the episode a ton of different things, some really surprising things, actually. She kind of blew me away by some of the things she talked about in a good way. But her book is all about the impact of stress, not just on the physical person, on their brain, on their body, but then how it expands outward. It's an amazing book. Like I said, The Impact of the Human Stress Response. You guys can find it anywhere out there. You can go on Amazon and find it. If you go to Mary's website, marywingo.com, she's willing to give you away a free sample of that book. All you got to do is enter in your email. So go to marywingo.com and get yourself a free sample of that book because you're going to love it. I really loved chatting with Mary and learning more about her book, and just her life experience. She's got a lot of really interesting stories. One day we'll probably end up having Mary back on the show because we just ran out of time when it came to all the things that we wanted to talk about. You guys get to sit back and relax now and listen to this wonderful episode of the podcast with my guest, Dr. Mary Wingo, all the way from South America. Enjoy.
You're listening to the Energy is Love podcast.
Energy is love.
The Energy is the Love podcast.
The Energy is Love podcast.
Energy is love.
The Energy is Love podcast.
The podcast for the universe.
The Energy is Love podcast.
What's up, everybody? You are now listening to the Energy is Love podcast. Obviously, you know that. And my guest today is Dr. Mary Wingo. I'm pronouncing your last name correct, right?
Absolutely correct.
Well, Mary, thank you so much for coming on this show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Craig. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, this is a first for the podcast. I'm excited because our listeners may not know, but Mary, you're actually in Ecuador, correct?
I am in Ecuador. I'm in the high in the Andes.
Yeah, but you're originally from America.
Yes. Yes, I'm from
And
Texas. Yes.
is that kind of where you grew up and everything in Texas?
Yeah, it's where I lived too long. And before escaping to Ecuador, that's it. That sums it up.
And how long have you been down in Ecuador?
I have been down here going on 2.5 years, and I have totally, well, I wouldn't say totally. That's not a correct word. I have, to the best extent that my talents and efforts allow me, tried integrating into the society here. A lot of expats come down here and they just hang around with other expats, hang around in enclaves. But no, I've gone to a lot of effort to integrate.
Well, now you got to tell me what the heck's an expat.
Oh, I'm sorry, expat. I apologize. Expat's just it's the same word for foreigner or immigrant, except it applies to. It's a special word that applies to white people. I'm not sure.
Is it kind of one of those local things down there, and that's what they call white people?
Well, it's usually okay. Now, this is not really. It's not really a correct term, foreigner. But it's a term usually used by folks that are from so-called westernized or modernized societies that move to places that in theory are less developed. I believe that's how that word actually came into fruition.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. It probably has some deeper meaning too, and they're all just kind of laughing behind your back, but
Oh yeah, I'm sure that's it.
So we have a lot that I want to talk to you about, and I really appreciate you reaching out to the podcast. We're going to get into a whole bunch of things because I definitely want to talk about your book. I think I've read through not all of it, but I've gotten through some of it, and it's super interesting. And I think it's really applicable in regards to kind of what we do here on the show. But first off, I want to talk about just you and learn about you and kind of get a good idea of your journey and your experience. And it's kind of interesting to me that you actually lived down there and that you went down to South America. Now that's kind of where you reside. And I'd like to know, if you're all right talking about it, why the hell you made that decision?
Yeah.
Like what led you down
Absolutely.
that path to decide you're going to leave Texas and leave America and head to South America?
Well, it's kind of a sort of Craig, it's a deep existential reason.
Well, you're on the right podcast for that.
Yeah. Well, okay. What happened? Well, okay. When it all comes down to it, for many years, I have been like a student of biology of stress. And then this extends back to when I was a geek, and I still am, a young undergraduate. And I came across this interesting field. It was kind of a nexus between physiology and like psychophysiology, and it was a very interesting nexus, and basically it was how human beings adapt. The stress response is basically the mechanism for how we adapt, and I really got into this. This is like, oh my God, this is so fascinating. And none of the none of the textbooks talk about this. I mean, this isn't this. I mean, yes, stress was very important. Yes, this correlates to tremendous amounts of cost to society and explosion of stress-related diseases. But nobody really had it put together. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is so fascinating. Well, fast forward to answer your question. To fast forward, I was still a student, many years later, got my PhD, worked in academia and research. And then I realized that there wasn't really much of a future in it. And I quit to become an entrepreneur, and ultimately to become an entrepreneur to leave the United States. I thought that it all relates to this topic of stress. I thought that we were going down a wrong path, and I watched everyone around me. I watched classmates around me literally, age very rapidly and become really old, way before their time, because exposure to stress in our society. And I found it with myself, and I'm like, oh boy, I need to get out of here. And so over many years and many years of preparation and just kind of altering my life, that's how I ended up down here. Now, how I ended up actually in Ecuador, I wanted to leave the U.S. How I actually ended up in Ecuador is just some lucky circumstances. But I was looking to immigrate. I just didn't quite know where at the time.
You said that initially it was kind of like this. You were an entrepreneur, right? Or seeking the entrepreneurship aspect of something.
Yeah, yes. Because I realized that there just wasn't any future in science, or academia. There just wasn't any future. I mean, it's just, I came into the field when, there was tons of budget cuts, literally just bloodbath and outsourcing and elimination of jobs. And, you can look at something like, okay, well, you can struggle at it, in any type of field that is in collapse, or you can just kind of alter yourself and do something else. And then, well, that's what I did. I did something else completely different. And this enabled me to immigrate with an E from the U.S. And it basically served me well, because it came back around. I didn't really want to write the book, but nobody else, and there's some brilliant people in the science field. I mean, there are some brilliant molecular biologists, physiologists, psychologists, sociologists, political scientists. There are some really brilliant people, especially in the psychological and biological realm, that have probably put out well over 100,000 papers over the last 40, 50 years. But things were getting so bad in our society, and nobody else had really put together it was a very fragmented field, very fragmented field, with different lingos, different sets of vocabularies for each set of specialists, and nobody was putting anything together, and this was critically important. And finally, things were getting so bad. I was down here. I'm in total luxury in Ecuador. I'm sitting here watching this slow motion going, no. And it's happening in Europe and Japan, China, in the developed parts of China. It's even here in Ecuador, in the developed social strata, so-called developed parts of Ecuador. The same types of stress-related illness and the costs associated with it. And it was just blowing my mind. And nobody was putting it there. I'm like, well, okay, obviously nobody else has got this level of expertise in the world. And I need to write a book. It had been on my mind for many years.
Had you ever written a book before?
Well, yeah, I'd done my fair share of writing and stuff, but something like this, no, something
this in depth and.
Well, to sort of be on the level of a more understandable Stephen Hawking. It's kind of like Stephen Hawking, but heck, I don't understand Stephen Hawking, and I've been reading his stuff for 20 years, and I've read it over and over and over and over, and I'm like, and that was another thing that just using Stephen, whom I've respected for 20 years. I mean, all my adult life, and I realized that scientists don't speak in a language, or academics in general don't speak in a language regular people can understand. So if I'm wanting to do something that really helps the public sector, that's really a humanitarian of interest, then I need to write this book in a way that people know what I'm talking about. So This is where I came in. 3 editors, which they tore the book apart, and they all had nervous breakdowns editing my book. I'm like, I'm sorry, well, what's the problem? And they're like, it's like, you're over our heads. Well, okay, tear it apart. And then they would have like these nervous, it was very interesting, Craig. It was almost supernatural. And then the conniptions that my editors would have. And then this would be after correcting the previous editor's work. So
Well,
it
the
took
topic,
many,
I mean,
yeah, it took many iterations to get this to where it was readable.
yeah, because
and
it's in
user-friendly.
depth. I mean, the whole idea that the name of the book, I don't think we've thrown it out there yet, The Impact of the Human Stress Response. And I mean, it's really all about how stress obviously affects us physically, mentally, inside of our brain and all that kind of different things. But then you expand outwards from that and really the impact that it has on society across the board in all these different ways and all these different aspects. That's a huge topic. Like your book, I'm sure could probably be volumes because there's so much to go
Oh
into
yeah,
it.
absolutely. I wanted to make it short too because nobody likes to read 600 page, and I don't really like to write it. I mean,
Yeah.
let me tell you, and there's more to it, Craig. Again, I had no intention of writing this. I'm just a small business person, and that's always. I mean, I was always the geek, but I really had because I knew it was going to take a big chunk out of me. I knew I would probably unravel because I knew that nobody really had a full handle on this, and I probably still don't either. But
How long did it take you to write it? Like how much time did you invest into it as far as?
Oh, it's only 3 months.
Oh,
But,
I'm
but
sure
it
it was a hard 3 months
20
though.
years. 20 years of like, what am I going to write? What am I going to write? Something needs to be written. Nobody else is. Well, what am I going to write? How am I going to look at this? And it was literally 20 years. I'm not kidding. 20 years. And if you really want to get weird, okay, if you really, really, really want to get weird, the book didn't come out until I went to a shaman ceremony in the middle of the Amazon here.
Man.
I had no interest at all. And I took this jungle medicine, and all of a sudden the words came out. Literally, they came out. They just spilled out of them. And that's why it took longer to edit it than it did to write it.
When you say you had no interest in going and seeing a shaman in the middle of the Amazon?
No, I had no interest in writing anything,
okay.
doing anything. I was, to be honest, I was kind of pissed off.
Yeah.
I mean, because, I just, I'm a delicate person, and just the way the whole system was ran as far as science and academia and anything related to that was really, in my opinion, it's kind of similar how they run things at Goldman Sachs or what, Machiavellian. And it's like, boy, these are not nice people, and backstabbing this on, just like corporate America.
I was going to say it's a lot of just how society runs and
Yeah,
politics.
yeah,
and all that kind of stuff.
yeah, and see, this was all a big existential crisis because I realized I did not. This is not my society. I mean, like when you realize that you're an alien in your own society, you just kind of want to reject everything, and and it's so luxurious living down here. I'm so, I mean, God, the little standard of life, even for the poorest person here, is like way, way higher. And you have no homelessness, no hungry people.
So it's so
And so
interesting.
it was very interesting. And so I'm thinking like, okay, well, I just shut that door, and then I go to this shaman ceremony, and I take some take some of the jungle medicine.
We got to talk all about that because I'm super interested.
Oh my
So,
God.
Have you ever seen a shaman before, or is that something?
No, I had never seen a shaman, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm here. It's a college town in the middle of the Amazon on the other side of the Andes. It's called Tana, and I'm thinking, well, well, what the heck? I'm up for anything. I'll try it.
How did you find out about it?
Well, you just, being a scientist, you tend to find out these things, and then I heard other other gringos down here talking about it, and then I started reading. I'm like, oh my God, this is a very, very promising treatment for PTSD.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, I want to try this. I want to try this.
Was it
You
more or
know.
less just out of curiosity, or did you feel like in
Well.
some way, shape, or form it was going to help you on your
Oh.
journey and all these
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
things?
I needed the help. And again, this is gonna come out sounding very harsh to a lot of our fellow countrymen, and I don't mean for it, but honestly, like again, I'm a delicate sensitivity, and I'm an alien in my own society.
Yeah.
And I realized that a lot of my society had stunted my growth, my maturity. I didn't fully grow up until I came down here to Ecuador. And then again, we go through this ayahuasca ceremony, and literally I hadn't written anything scientific in 10 years. I just totally shut the door. I mean, I was reading all this time, but I had done absolutely nothing. And then like literally the next day words started like spilling out on the
Yes.
page.
So,
And it's like, oh my God. I mean, like literally it was like almost like another force.
yeah.
I mean, I
Mary,
realize
I'm
that
so
this sounds
excited.
ridiculous.
No, it doesn't
but
sound ridiculous at all.
but that's because you have to be skeptical, and the mind does do weird things to us, but it was almost like another person.
So was it
Not me.
ayahuasca that you took during the
Yes.
ceremony?
Yes, it was the ayahuasca.
Okay, so I've never taken it. I've never gone through that sort of ceremony or anything like that. I've done a lot of research.
It's illegal in
looking.
the U.S.
It
It's
is illegal
That's
still in the U.S.,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But I want to know if you can, in the best way that because I imagine it's probably really difficult to explain, but what you experienced during that time period, because I've heard a bunch of different stories of people and their retelling of the experience, and I've had really deep spiritual experiences and things like that through meditation and all these other sorts of stuff. But what did you experience in that space?
Well, I'll tell you. I actually went through 7 when it all over like a 7 month period.
Wow.
Yeah, my last one was right before Christmas. And
So you liked it?
yeah. Well, I mean, no, it's just I realized there was a lot of work that needed to be done. Okay, well, I'll tell you what happens. Basically, and let me tell you, I learned a lot about biology. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about biology during this too. What happens is if you have a particular trauma you have to resolve, and I realized like I'm a practitioner of meditation. I studied under a Theravada Buddhist monk in Texas for a while there, and I had advanced. I mean, this is like well maybe more like 17 years now. Anyway, a long time. And I realized, I have gained somewhat of expertise in multiple types of meditation, but it didn't seem like they were working. For whatever reason, there was like a block.
Do you feel like you kind of
And
plateaued in a sense?
yeah. And so this ayahuasca goes in, and basically what happens, and this is what happens a lot. I'm not saying it happens to everybody, but when you're going in to try to solve problems that you have with yourself, it's like a flashback. So you go back to where the problem originally started. A lot of times it's before you could even talk. I mean, you're like, oh wow, this is how I felt like when I was like a baby or 2 years old. Like you feel the sensations, but you don't have the speech. And you go back and you relive, and sometimes you've forgotten. I mean, it's like, oh my God, I totally forgot that. And that's where that phobia came from. That's where that bad attitude came from. That's where, and so, if you don't prepare correctly for this, it can be a total nightmare. I mean, you can feel like you're dying.
Yeah.
But if you prepare, you have to prepare your diet. You have to, eliminate stress before and after for about a week before and after, no sex, no salt, no sugar. I mean, it's really strict. I mean, you can't jerk around on this or you will have an awful, awful time. It will be like hell. Well, and yeah, it is a little bit, it's sometimes a little bit like hell, but yeah, you go through and basically everything that you set your mind to, you can solve. And how I think that this occurs scientifically is at the level of the hypothalamus and part of the posterior hypothalamus called the paraventricular nucleus. And it's where the your thoughts, okay, are in nexus with your autonomic nervous system, your sympathetic nervous, so your fight or flight, okay, for instance, okay. And I realized, again, being a scientist, there was a lot of things that came to me. I realized that, okay, the oxytocin kind of cuts that link so that you can think of thoughts, if it works correctly, that were traumatic, but you don't have the horrible physical panic feelings that come with that. That nexus is cut. So that's how trauma can be cured. A lot of the trauma, I've realized, is through the miserable bodily responses, the pounding heart, the horrible nervous feeling. That is what contributes to PTSD and trauma that just lasts and lasts and lasts and doesn't go away. It's the feeling, the feelings that you come with the thoughts. And if that nexus is cut, then you can think the thought without experiencing the horrible feelings. And that's how you cure yourself. And then, again, I realized during this that this is probably, a lot of folks think that this is facilitated through serotonergic, because a lot of the other psychedelics are. And yeah, there might be, but I think this is on a higher level. I think the core level of the change occurs on the oxytocin level, the bonding hormone level. I think that is where the relief from horrible trauma and symptoms and stuff like that. I think that is where the cure or the relief comes from. Yeah. And so, after this series, I realized that I could, the effects of my meditation finally paid off.
Do you think the fact that you had been practicing meditation for so long really helped in that journey and that experience?
Yes, it's kind of like riding a bicycle in a weird way. Like you might fall off many times and you're thinking, man, I'm never going to get this. I've been practicing so long. Oh, well, it didn't hurt, and then like literally a gate opens and then all of a sudden, finally, after all those years, you've kind of reached, a part where, you can, control your thoughts, your emotions. You can, all that work that you did that didn't seem to pay off. It's like there was like a pay it forward, and it just was unlocked. And then, yeah, it's quite amazing. It's quite amazing.
Quite amazing. I'm jealous. It's one of those things that it's on like my bucket list. It's one of those things that I want to try and do one day. And I mean, I think it's asinine that things like that are still, criminalized and illegal and things like that here in the States. But
yeah,
it sounds like in that experience, because you said afterwards, that's when the book came, where you just started writing and everything just started flowing.
That's right.
Do you think that you were able to kind of move through some trauma from your past and that opened up the floodgates, and then you were able to connect to what,
Oh, absolutely. Oh my gosh, stuff I didn't even know.
Yeah.
Stuff I didn't even know, Craig. I mean, I didn't, oh my God. I didn't realize, that affected me. I mean, like, there's I can go on and on. There's many examples, but basically it's like a flashback, but instead of like the horrific feelings that a flashback gives, you live it in slow motion, and then you're able to like see it from an adult perspective, especially if it's trauma you had as a child, and you're just able to resolve it. Okay, all right,
That's interesting. That's
It's very
essentially what we
interesting.
do. When I say we, my wife and I, that's basically what we do when we help people and when we work with them through energy and the things like that. And that's why the whole idea of not just ayahuasca, but some of those other kind of psychedelics and the things that allow you to go to that space and be in that space in a less kind of anxious way with all the stress and anxiety and the fear associated with it. Because that's kind of what you're talking about with the oxytocin and the things like that in the brain, where it severs that aspect so you can, address the situation or look at it kind of from the outside, and then you draw the correlation and you see, oh my gosh, like you said, that's thing that happened even before I was old enough to walk somehow made some impact and imprint on who I am still today and is still affecting me today.
Oh, here's another thing. Here's another thing I know you'll be interested with this. A lot of folks get the sensation that they're surrounded by like a mother-like figure,
Mm-hmm.
or some people say God, or a sensation like that.
Yeah.
And I got that too. My
See, I've
mom
heard that
husband actually
before.
passed away, and I got that too. Like, oh, it's like, and what that is? Do you know what that is? That's the oxytocin.
You think so?
That's the oxytocin. That's your first bond, is your
Yeah.
mom, and so that closeness, and so yeah, that's where I got, and then of course oxytocin dampens the sympathetic nervous response, the fight or flight response. So of course you feel like you're under mom's care, safe care. Then yeah, you're a lot more brave. You got a lot more courage to just let things go.
See, I love it
Yeah.
because you have that scientific brain, that analytical brain, and you're going through this incredibly spiritual experience. And I think that's so fascinating in a sense, because I listen to your story, I listen to you explain all these things, and they, like you talk about this feeling of being encompassed and surrounded by like a motherly feel or some sort of presence, whether it's God or whatever the case may be. And I love that in your mind, you chalk it up to the oxytocin effect, which it very well may be. And I think that it's silly to try to, I'm not saying you're silly. I think it's silly when people try to pin it down to one thing, because I think that, yes, it's the oxytocin. I think it's also possibly your actual mother. You said your mother passed away, so she's present with you in that space during that experience. Also, whether we want to think about like Mother Earth and Gaia and all that other kind of crazy out there bizarre stuff, I think that it could be any number of those effects. But it's neat. In the end, I think it's just neat.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Very very interesting, and very I think, and I'm not a typical. Oh God, no, I'm not a typical scientist. Um, because I'm not a bureaucrat, and I think that just being a bureaucrat is really destroying. Being a bureaucrat in today, not being a bureaucrat like in like 20 years ago or 30 years ago, but being bureaucrat, what it takes to keep your job
The
in
games you
a,
have to play.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's destroying a lot of problem solving, and a lot of fraud is being perpetuated because the people just, you need the money. I mean, you're not going to keep your job unless you keep the grants coming, unless and it's just, it's not all that much money anyway. I mean, it's all this ado about really not very much. I mean, at least if you're in Goldman Sachs, you're bringing down millions of dollars, but you're only talking an extra few thousand a year, and then just people going after each other's throats like a rat race. And I think it's destroying this. So to respond to what you said, I'm not a typical scientist in that I've also studied deeply the philosophy of science and how metaphysics turns into the physical understanding, physics or whatever. And really, we're in things that we cannot prove or disprove. So I'm not one to say, okay, well, your experience is due to oxytocin. Now, oxytocin could happen and facilitate, or you could be in the presence of a higher being, because we can't prove or disprove that. Now,
Yeah.
I realize most scientists are going to say, oh, well, this is BS, total BS. But if you really look at the true logical philosophy of science, and you look at the philosophy of Karl Popper, and even not Nassim Taleb, who's the most incredible philosopher of our time.
He's got a
of the
lot of really
21st.
interesting stuff.
Oh yeah, oh he greatly is, and Karl Popper, who influenced me, also influenced him. And so you really start kind of, when you look at Karl Popper's stuff and like, well, you can't falsify it. I mean, it's not in a realm that can be tested. So I'm not going to, a lot of scientists will come and just poo poo and like, yeah, this is BS and da da da. And I'm saying, well, it can't be tested. So I'm not going to sit here and, you know, it would be, well, it's not really discredit because it's not a valid argument.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it's not a valid argument. So, yeah.
Well, that's an amazing experience.
So some crazy things happen in the jungle. Let me tell you. I'm not kidding. There's some. Well, when you come to the Amazon, you'll see it.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I hope that one day I'll get. Well, I know for a fact one day I'll get there. We'll just see when. So let's talk about the book, The Impact of Human Stress Response. First off, the topic itself is just so fascinating to me, especially the way that you kind of break it down in the book. I like that it's easy. There's times when it is still kind of dense in a sense, do you know what I mean? But I don't know how you would be able to address the topic without that, but you really do a wonderful job of making it easy for everybody to kind of follow and understand. And it's a fun read as well. But in your mind, I'm just going to ask you this, Kay. In your mind, what do you think is the most detrimental effect of not just stress on the individual person, but how that affects society as a whole?
Okay. Well, probably, like, if you just to make a topic we can talk about for eons, shrink it down to like one sentence. Ultimately, the most potent stressor we have, for the good or for the bad, is relational stress with other human beings, 2 or more human beings. And basically, if you want to relate this to larger society, this is definitely problems with relational stress. And again, to frame it into a different mode, there are actually 5 major causes of stress and the explosion of costs and stress-related diseases and early deaths in modernized society. But to directly relate to relational stress, the ones that that drove me to write this book are stress associated with inequality in a society and stress associated with loss of social capital. Those are 2 of the 5. And that probably every single problem, well, I wouldn't say that. I would say the major problems that we're seeing politically. Because things are coming apart. I mean, seriously, it's like the jig's up. I mean, it's basically, I knew the jig was up 10 years ago.
It definitely
I knew
like that.
Or more than that, maybe more like 12 years ago. But a lot of folks are just regular, blue collar, folks. I mean, all they have is Sean Hannity. When you're in West Texas, you're driving 100 miles to your job site, and all there is AM radio, and all you have is Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity and, folks of that similar ilk. Then they're going to have a distorted view on things. Well, even for those people, the jig's up. I mean, it's basically the U.S. and Europe. Well, everyone's in a lot of trouble right now, politically, and we're looking what I see to be humanitarian crisis.
Do you think there's going to be a major shift, like in the next 5 or 10 years, or more immediate than that?
Well, then this is just my opinion, and my opinion has been many, many times wrong. But I'm looking at this election. I'm looking at this election.
Have you been following it pretty close?
Oh yeah, I follow everything politically and economically as well as, and so I see how humans. Let me put this out here, okay? I believe, okay, that stress drives all revolutions. Okay, why? Because now that, like, in my book, and the information was out there, just nobody ever really compiled it. When you have very strong inequality in a society, okay, And then you have loss of social network, and we've lost so much in the last 150 years, since basically the Industrial Revolution. Participation in anything, I mean, whether it's political, social, religious communities. A lot of people just stay home. They don't go outside. They don't walk. I mean, here you're in Ecuador, but boy, people are walking everywhere. I mean, grannies are standing on the side of the road with their grandchildren hitchhiking. I mean, you don't have the isolation that we in the modernized world we've developed. And there's other factors too. It's not just these, but when you have this and you have people disenfranchised, and the ability to just even get married, not even have kids, get married and buy a house, and I mean, just the most simplest stuff becomes impeded. People, these usually in history, revolutions happen. It's because ultimately people might not know this, but they know on a deep level they're fighting for their lives.
Fighting for that change, huh?
Well, they're fighting for their lives.
Yeah.
They're fighting for their lives because the stress of being in a situation where you can't feed your family, and you don't have support, actually, in hard, core terms, results in early death, greater health costs, and more disability. Okay, so if it doesn't kill you, it's going to really screw you up. So, people don't know this, but they knew this. They know when they're being, they're on the real short end of things, and their families, the quality of life is really being affected in a way. And, well, this is when people, again, you have to go back to Karl Marx, because Karl Marx described this cycle. I'm not saying, rah-rah socialism. I'm just talking about reading this academically, okay? They get like this, they get all uppity, and they want these revolutions when ultimately their life is at stake.
Yeah.
And I mean, that is why revolutions happen over and over. This is how sociology, this is how people aggregate. And, and it all comes down to economics, which all comes down ultimately to resource distribution of resources.
And so you think when it comes to stress as a whole, it has all those varied effects, like I said, not just on the body, but also on the society and everything else, on the planet, really. In your mind, what's one of the best ways that people can manage that stress personally?
Well, okay. I've got these 5 major causes in my book that I discuss. Number 1 is loss of working memory, or overcomplexity, and that is another episode just by itself. Then we have loss of social capital, or we have loss of equality in a society, loss of social capital, loss of the human, or derangement of the human biome, or the friendly gut bacteria. Well, the bacteria, I shouldn't say that, microorganisms that exist within you and within your orifices and on your skin. The derangement of that. And then the other is just outright chemical stress, pollution, and exposure to chemicals that did not maybe exist 50, 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And so we don't have the mechanisms, especially in our liver, and in our immune system, to metabolize these foreign substances. So hence chemical stress, intense chemical stress. Well, what I suggest, I mean, it's kind of like writing, having a food diary or a money diary if you're trying to control your spending. Now you have the vocabulary, because a lot of people just didn't have the vocabulary, okay? You look at these 5 descriptions, and then you sit down and you just make an itemized list of all of this that you have going on in your life that pertains to your life. And you're going to realize that this might go out into the hundreds. I mean, this might take a few weeks to think of everything that you do that is under the strict definition of stress, that is causing you to tax these mechanisms excessively. And another little thing I'll just kind of throw out there, now that if you understand what stress really is, it's really important. Like for instance, and this is logical. If you, like for instance, you have stress on your pulmonary system, you've got really, really bad flu, okay? Well, you don't want to put additional stress on the same stressed body part. So you don't want to run a marathon when you're still sick. That could turn into pneumonia. You could die, okay? Or you don't want to start smoking, 3 packs of cigarettes a day. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
When you add a stress already on top of another stressor on that body part, then you're looking at some serious illness, some serious healthcare costs, and possible disability. So you really want to be careful about stacking stressors up. If you have somebody die in your family, okay, you really want to be careful about that high-powered executive job that you have. If like your wife dies and then you have this job working 16 hours a day, as a banker at Goldman Sachs. This could be a spiral statistically, odds are towards an early death. You really want to control, if you've got a major life-changing stress, you want to be careful of the other stressors as they're defined in this book.
See, I love that.
Yeah.
Because you can relate that to that stacking effect of stress. If you look at it globally, how that has just been slowly the progression of society, of the way that, whether it's global warming and pollution and all these other, wars and things like that, we just continually stack and stack and stack and stack everything on top of one another. And I mean, it makes sense why, we talked about where it's kind of getting to that tipping point and that catalyst where things are either going to change or undoubtedly things are going to change. It's just in what regards.
Yeah. And, again, I wrote this book as sort of like a humanitarian project. I really had no intention, because I knew it was going to take a lot out of me, because I knew this covered a huge amount of data. And I could feel myself becoming a bit unraveled on some days, little bit crazy, just a little bit, kind of pushed over that limit.
Did it really make you analyze your own life and everything like that?
Oh, I had already done that before. And I realized, that, I was just a different duck, and I had to operate by a different set of rules than my fellow countrymen. It's just me.
Like you said, you always felt like an alien.
Oh yeah, I always felt like an alien.
Do you feel much more at peace?
And it didn't
home?
matter. I've traveled all over the U.S. and I saw. This is recently. Before I moved here, and I've traveled all over Ecuador as well, and I've traveled into Colombia and Peru as well. But one thing I saw in my final years living, just how rough people were looking. It didn't matter. It doesn't matter if this is in Bozeman or if it was in New York City or if it was in Baltimore or Washington, D.C. It didn't matter.
Yeah. I
just saw in every major city, because this was usually by car, I saw where, there was homelessness, kind of, emptied out strip malls, kind of decrepit, big box buildings, that, were just infrastructure building, just looking rough, people looking rough, a lot of just people just down on their luck, rough looking and not healthy. And I'm thinking, this isn't what people look like, when I was a kid. This isn't the same America.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't just blame it on Texas. Everyone likes to blame everything on Texas. But no, it didn't matter what state. Everybody is rough looking. And I'm like, this is a humanitarian and nobody's addressing this. And so, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I wandered off. I don't think I answered your question.
You're fine. You're fine. How
Yeah.
much different is it, like in your own personal space and kind of in your own, when you kind of step outside and you look at yourself, how different of a person are you? Because how long have you been living in South America? Like 2 years, is that right?
2.5 years. Oh, I'm not even the same human being.
Yeah. What aspects
Um,
of it you think have been changed?
well, okay, number one, because the food is it's not GMO down here.
Uh-huh.
Um, I I've been able to like lose 20 pounds without without a lot of people do. I mean, there's a lot of junk food, and there's a lot of good, yummy food, and but I'm just talking about like if your choice in like many communities in the U.S. is to go to Walmart and get your produce from there, versus go to the farmers markets here, where the food was just grown up the hill.
Yeah.
Literally, like you just walk up the side of the mountain. They grow these huge gardens on the side of the mountain. It's like a 45-degree angle. And so it's literally up the hill, maybe a couple miles, brought down in a little truck, same with the milk, and stuff like that. And so you realize that, oh my God, there's something really wrong with the food situation. I mean, for Joe Average. I mean, I'm not talking you go to Trader Joe's or you've got access to, organic markets, but I'm talking like Joe Average
Yeah, the
who
vast
has
majority,
access
I
to
think,
Walmart.
probably of America.
Yeah, like probably 90+% of population.
Yeah.
That there's definitely something very, very wrong because, I was able to cure a bunch of problems.
Just by that
I mean,
simple fact you were
just
eating
just
healthier
by
and everything.
just by like eating tomatoes here instead of in my home country.
That's really
eating.
interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
it makes perfect sense, obviously, but I think we take that for granted here in the States where it's, because we're kind of in that position, me and my family and things like that, where we're stuck shopping in these places where I know that it's not the healthiest, but then at the same time, that's what's available and that's what we can afford at times and things. But I don't know, it's bizarre how we accept that in society where elsewhere
Yeah. Again, you see why, I've always been an odd duck. I mean, I've always, always it's like, because I'm seeing stuff. I mean, it's as obvious as could be to me. Again, this is through my scientific, geeky, analytical eye. Like, wow, and then you come down here and, you don't have homelessness, you don't have hunger. You've got, a really good socialized healthcare system that's cheap.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not. It doesn't have to bankrupt. You can have a decent, socialized healthcare system without bank. They got their ideas from Cuba. Cuba has got an excellent healthcare system, and they brought their experts down here to Ecuador just to help set it up. They're really well educated in Cuba. Cuba
Yeah.
takes their model from Russia, and Russia's got like half the population's got a bachelor's degree. It's the most educated. They're very, very well educated people. But yeah, I mean, they know how to do stuff on a shoestring. And so you go into these, I mean, it is like, you can go see someone private for like $20-$30.
Really?
You can go. Yeah, you can go just like a doctor's office that you would see in your hometown. Nice, high-rise building. Like a westernized. Like $30.
Wow.
Well, I thought, but there's all these clinics. I mean, there's like a bajillion of these like socialist clinics everywhere. I'm going to just try that and see how that works. Because I mean, I like being from Texas. Like, I have no idea. Like, I'm a total babe in the woods. And
How much of a culture shock was it when you went down?
Oh well. I was so ready to leave. It was all a relief. It's more like when I haven't been back to the States, but I know it's going to be more of a culture shock going back to the States than it was moving down here. Plus, being in Texas, very, very huge Latin American culture there. But still, it's much different than Mexico.
Yeah.
It's a completely different animal than Mexico. But still, the basic, it was actually no culture shock at all. Everything was easier. Everything. Everything that everyone thinks should be harder was actually easier. But yeah, so I go to like these little health clinics, and you're thinking like either they're like real low cost or they're free. So you're thinking like in the States that there would be thousands of people lined up to get their teeth cleaned or whatever. No, you go in there and there's like nobody in there. They're like, okay, well, the dentist will see you now. I'm like, what? Because we're used to like just packed, packed clinics and waiting for 2 hours to see a doctor. No. The doctor waits for you here. For the most part. I mean, there's times like, I went just to see what it was like. I went to the emergency room at the Socialist Pinko Kami Hospital here. And everyone, oh, it's a horrible hospital. I'm like, oh no, it can't be worse than John Peter Smith Hospital in Fort Worth, Texas. There's no hospital in the world that's worse. So I went in there, just to get something looked at. And yeah, it was a little bit busy. I had to wait about an hour.
Yeah.
But get in there and the nurse is just professional, happy to see you. And then you go in, the doctor, doctor's egalitarian, happy to see you. And the doctor will walk you out and help you find a taxi. And this is all like, doesn't cost a dime.
Very nice.
Like, oh my God. And it's a very, very low cost. I don't know. You just have to sort of experience it to believe it.
Do you have plans to come back?
No. I mean, if I have to like come visit, I'll come visit. But I have really, it's so alien now. I really don't have, I've got many, many loved ones, but they can come visit me here. They'll have a better time here and they won't want to go back.
You're pretty content and happy then, huh?
Oh yeah.
Well, that's good.
But ultimately, did you have another question? I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
I'm kind of flying. What was your next question? I can go into the science. What else would you like to know?
I don't have another question, Mary. I just like chatting with you. I think this is all incredible. It's amazing. I mean,
okay. Let me
good.
geek out. Okay, let me geek out for a second. I want to see if you can understand what the nuts and bolts of the stress response really is. Okay. The definition, for the longest time, we didn't even have a definition of stress. I mean, we've got all these stress-related illnesses. We've got, trillions being spent every year trying to contend with stress, but there was absolutely no definition. And after many years, I was able to finally come up with a definition. And the definition is this: stress is the rate of adjustment you undergo in order to adapt to whatever environment you find yourself in. So there's two aspects. You've got the environment and you've got the actual agent, the person, the agent, the organism. Okay. So a lot of the emphasis with stress management and a lot of it's good, and I use a lot of it. I mean, we talk about meditation, like mindfulness meditation.
Yeah.
It's a very, very good tool. But how good is mindfulness meditation if you're in the middle of ground zero, Fukushima, with your DNA being blasted apart?
Yeah, it's not going to get you very far.
I mean, you see what I'm saying? With our culture, we like to put everything, and yes, we need to be responsible. We need that personal agency, in solving our problems.
It's much easier to meditate when you're happy. Like when you're stressed out and life is challenging and you're going through something, it's really hard to go to that space of, relaxing your mind and meditating and being mindful and present.
No, it needs to be done. I mean, that's when you need it the most. But it goes beyond just that. I mean, for instance, if you're working in a very highly toxic corporate environment, very Machiavellian, where you don't know if you're going to have a job. I mean, it's just constantly. Well, the thing is, you can do mindfulness meditation. You can, seriously, you can help yourself a lot. There's a lot of things a person can do. But ultimately, the problem is the toxic environment. And a lot of people blame themselves when the problem is actually the environment and you just need to get out of the environment.
Yeah.
whatever that environment is. So for me, I could sit there and do mindfulness meditation in the US all I wanted to, but if I just wasn't a good fit, my personality was not a good fit for the culture I was in, then it was, you're always going to be stressed. I mean, you're going to be less stressed, but it's still going to cause stress related illnesses. So you have to look at the environment, you have to look at the person. So the person can feel guilty and like, well, I haven't meditated correctly, but when it's a very toxic environment, you just have to really do what you can to change the environment.
I would agree.
If you're like in an abusive relationship, and
you're not going to meditate your way out of that.
Yeah, I mean, this is just something where you could get killed or, messed up. You know what I'm saying? There's certain factors that override, so yeah. And our society, again, I go over those 5 reasons in my book, 5 major causes in my book. But so what happens is you have this rate of adjustment. And okay, and I'll just give you an example because it's very, very easy to understand. Okay, like moving to the Andes, it's very, very high altitude. It's like 1,000 feet higher than Denver, and Denver's high. And so what you have to do, especially when you're a foreigner and like you absolutely have no conditioning to this level of altitude, is you have to form more red blood cells. The nexus between the deep parts of your lung called the alveoli and the capillary beds need to kind of reconfigure so you can capture more oxygen because it's actually much thinner. And so you have to just basically reformat a lot of your tissues. Very important. I mean, this is like oxygen. So it's not like, this is not negotiable. I mean, you have to reformat. It's
not optional.
Well,
it's going to happen regardless.
Right. Or you're going to die, or you're going to have to move again, change your environment. You can't, I mean, I've kind of wondered sometimes. I've had some, like when you're up at 14,000 feet, you're cursing God and nature alike. It's like, but anyway, hiking, when you're hiking up, but not just up at 14, you're hiking up the side of a hill at 14,000 feet. You feel the limits of your humanness, definitely. Okay, you enter this state. Okay, so say you're coming from the U.S. to the Andes, so you're like a couple thousand feet, and then you go up to like say 9,000 feet. Okay, your body enters this plastic, if it's operating, if it's functioning correctly, this plastic state, to where it becomes, it kind of reconfigures and it becomes more plastic. Okay, and it becomes more plastic so it can become more flexible, so it can adapt to the new environment. Okay, without you having to go into shock. Okay, so it's either that or go into shock and die. Have a cardiac arrest, go into systemic shock and die. Okay, so basically, what everyone has missed. I mean, there's been talk about this. There's kind of a dance around this. There's been some incredible systems thinkers, like chaos, along in the chaos theory realm, thinkers that have added a lot to this, of complex systems, But ultimately, you become more plastic during the stress. That's adaptation. You're adapting. Well, yeah, you're going to become more plastic in order, hopefully, to fit the new environment. Or because we have a ginormous frontal lobe, which causes us almost more problems than it solves, because it's so big and it's so glitchy. We have the ability, so we can either change ourselves, or if we've got a nice big fat frontal lobe that can solve problems and plan in the future and control impulses, then we can change the environment. And so if we're cold, we can make a coat, or we can build a house. You see what I'm saying? This is how society developed. You can see how this is how civilization develops. This is how, okay, I'm cold and I can't leave this region. So what am I doing? I'm going to build shelter. I'm going to use my brain. I'm going to change the environment. I don't have to change myself, I can change the environment. Okay, but then again, when you experience increasing levels of stress, and this is what I'm seeing in the US, you start losing this valuable skill because the high cortisol shuts down parts of the frontal lobe in order to conserve energy. And so that's when, when people get stressed, they're not thinking right, they don't make the right decisions, they make impulsive decisions, they lose their temper, maybe they develop even a mental illness because of the frontal lobe shutting down because of stress. Yes. So this is stuff nobody else knows. This is stuff that you have these 100,000 plus papers, ideas, studies, and they dance around this, but they were never able to really kind of put it together like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's super interesting.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, our morphology actually changes. And you can imagine, here's another thing. When you become more plastic, your ability to exchange energy and material with the environment is greater. So, for instance, okay, during the sympathetic nervous response, your pupils dilate, of your eyes. Well, why? Why would you want? Well, so more photons can enter, so you can take in more visual information. So stuff that is in the outside world can enter without being impeded to your inside and be processed. Okay, that's just one example. Okay, there's many examples of, and it's a defensive response. Okay, or a not defensive response. You can have defensive responses. So if your pupil becomes a smaller diameter, you're trying to block out visual information. You're trying to block out photons from light. Okay, so you just extend this to everything. So basically, the reason why we get sick, like say, we get the flu or what, something contagious, is that literally our immune system, endocrine system, everything, our epithelium, our system that forms a protective barrier, the skin, and all of it becomes thinner, and stuff can enter and take up residence, including microorganisms that wouldn't have a chance if we were in if we were so plastic. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
This is how, especially with contagious, infectious illnesses, this is the overall story. This is why, if you work too hard, you're going to catch everything that comes along. Well, it's because your morphology is literally more open.
Yeah.
And why is that? Well, it's because of a lot of things, but pretty much cortisol is the main dampener. Is a main control. There's a lot of controllers, but cortisol is the big player, is the big daddy in this.
It makes sense. All these things and all the way, because you do a beautiful job of kind of describing it and walking people through it, because it just, it makes sense. It's kind of a practical way to look at it. And then I'm also sitting here thinking about, because this is long-term effects of stress. So if you have stress and trauma and things like that you're experiencing on a regular basis and you're stuck in it for a very, very long time, it's just that compounding effect across the board. It's just, it's really kind of insane and asinine, and it's sad too. And I think as a whole, we have to change and alter probably the way that we look at it, and probably the way that because there's this whole mentality or belief, or you have to work hard if you want to be successful, or all these different things, and it's really taxing your body to a certain point, which is just to its detriment. So you're going to work hard and you're going to invest a lot of time and energy in doing something because you're trying to become, whether it's successful or you're trying to provide for your family or whatever the case may be, but it has that, on the back end effect of it where you're really killing yourself in the end. And it just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, see, this is you're talking an existential crisis I had many years ago, relating this. So how do you define success?
Yeah.
You know, how, um, I mean, I don't know if we really want to, boy, I know I'm going to cause a lot of trouble. I'm glad that I live down here in Ecuador, because I'm probably going to get put on some list somewhere saying this, but I don't
You're
care. Come and get me. But the so-called, I don't know if you would chalk it up to the so-called Protestant work ethic,
Mm-hmm.
or the massive brainwashing we've been fed through the media, that you know, through, again, you know, it's nothing but a bunch of fat cats. It's nothing magical. It's just a bunch of fat cats at the top just wanting to get fatter. I mean, that's all it is. So, oh well, we can do it this way, and you know, we can extract, you know, more, you know, pounds of flesh this way. You know, we can get richer this way and increase, you know, without thinking, without looking at the effects of this. But I honestly think that the definitions of success in our modern world is driven through brainwashing due to exposure to tons of media.
You think so?
Um,
See, I don't even think it necessarily, I agree with you on that aspect, but when it comes to kind of the programming and the brainwashing that exists, because I think about this in my own personal space. So I have a very kind of open-minded approach to life and a belief system, as far as embracing what you love and going after your passion, and that should be your goal and your purpose in life, right? Regardless of whether it brings financial success or happiness. That's not the root of real true happiness and joy. Money definitely isn't. But then I'll talk to my children and I still give them kind of the same not lecture, but kind of the same advice, or kind of the same direction that I got as a child, that's very commonplace, as far as, you know, if you want to be successful, then you need to go out and find yourself a career and find some, you know, something that you're going to be able to make a lot of money at, regardless of whether or not you're passionate about it. And so I think a lot of those concepts and a lot of those ideas and those belief systems and that programming, that brainwashing that you're kind of talking about, I mean, that stuff's just been around and ingrained in us for so long. And it's,
it was ingrained in me.
Yeah.
I mean, like I got my PhD really young, and I realized the damage it did me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, of being so quote unquote successful so young, it damn near destroyed me. I mean, like, it's very toxic. It's a very, pushing yourself like that is very toxic. And it's ultimately, again, if you're want to look at the hardcore, you know, cause and effect, how much it's really going to cost, especially in the U.S. system, where for whatever reason we can't seem to get, you know, primary health care taken care of. It's not really universal. I mean, yeah, certain states, certain communities, populations might have it a little bit together. But the thing is, I mean, I guess living down here, I mean, like what I would say to, like, say your children, which I just, God, I feel so sorry for the kids. What I would say is, especially where the educational system is bloated. I mean, you know, it's the most expensive in the world, and it's just returning less and less and less, and people are being just killed with debt. It's when I tell Ecuadorians here, we're, you know, public university's free.
Really?
For the bachelor's. Now, for master's, PhD, yeah, you're going to fork out, you know, some money. But yeah, seriously, yeah, they're very enlightened culture here.
And see, I love the fact that here in the States we think, well, there's just no way in hell that's even, you know, we can't make that happen, and we have all these excuses in place. And it's like, well, look at all these other places across the globe.
Well, yeah, and the reason why, Craig, is because we're spending so much of the capital generated in the U.S. goes towards defense and to feed the banks.
Yeah.
There's actually, I mean, you look at Ecuador, you look at, like, say, Cuba, which, I mean, on paper, I mean, Ecuador, what, you know, people make like $300, $400, maybe $500 a month here. I mean, you might like get, an occasional person making 1,000, or if it's a really good job, 1,500. But yet, and these are in U.S. dollars. They use the dollar down here.
Okay.
So I mean, this is like, there's no mistake with seeing what a dollar buys here versus there.
Yeah.
But the big difference is that their military is just based on security. Okay, so like they set up for parades and religious events, and they sing in bands. The police and the military, they have these musical bands and dances, and they'll dance with people. And I'm telling you, I've got pictures for proof. It's like, what? A singing policeman? Oh my God, But no. So it's not meant to go overseas and start wars. It's just meant for, just kind of sort of like Army Corps of Engineer sorts, repairing infrastructure, and it's cheaply to do when you have your military trained in that. And so when you're not spending money on the huge amount on defense, and it's not really defense, it's hegemony on building other, trying to take over other countries for their resources, usually for oil or minerals or something like that. It's impoverishing. And it's been all of our lives, Craig. I mean, it was less so when we were kids, but it's just this cycle that's just gotten worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And regulatory mechanisms have been disabled or ignored, fallen by the wayside. And now, I know that this is going to upset some people, but ultimately, what I see is an attempt at basically a coup by Hillary Clinton. I mean, this is where it's come from. Beforehand, it was like, well, you had to appear, votes actually mattered. But this is just, no, seriously. I mean, if you really want to look at what a coup is, I mean, this is right in front of our faces. And so it's, I think that we've been brainwashed. I would encourage your children to go into business for themselves. I mean, to like cultivate ways. Don't feed into, if you want to go to university, go to another country, go to Ecuador, and just have them have
my
a
oldest
student.
is going to be listening. She's going to love that. That's her dream.
Yeah,
is to go somewhere else outside of the States.
Where the residents get, free or very low. I mean, if you want that, if that is what, but if you're going to stay in America, just learn how to shift for yourself. I mean, it might take a lot of experimentation or whatever, but I mean, give your kid $500 and help them set up some little enterprise of some sort.
Something
and work with them with that. I mean, that in my opinion, in our society, because I don't believe that there's any future in, like, say, working for the government. I think a lot of that's going to be cut. I don't think there's any future working for a big corporation because they're laying off left and right. The stuff that our parents had, these secure institutions are very unstable. And so the only thing stable is, okay, can you shift for whatever and hustle money? That's probably the most important skill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Mary, you've done a beautiful job of painting a picture of why the hell we all need to move to Ecuador and Central America.
No, somewhere else. But I'm very happy and I really thank you for this. It's actually been the most different type of interview I've had. Normally, we stick to like very structured subjects. But if you want
we
me
just
on
wing
for
it here
anything
on the
else,
podcast.
if you want to discuss anything else, because there's a lot of other aspects we can discuss, I'm happy to come on again anytime.
Well, beautiful. Well, thank you so much. And it's marywingo.com, right? That's the best place to go find out all your information.
marywingo.com. And they can get a free excerpt of my book. Just enter your email and get a free excerpt, and along with a training video for that excerpt. And just start. There's a lot of free stuff. Just go get it on my website.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Mary.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. And I hope everybody enjoyed this episode. Go find Mary's book. Go find out all of her information. Like I said, I'm about halfway through the book. I still got a little bit more to read, but thank you so much. And everybody,
Thank you.
go out and have a beautiful, wonderful day and go visit Mary in South America.
I went to a shaman. Heck, I don't understand Stephen Hawking. Crazy things happen in the jungle. I'm an alien in my own society. And I took this jungle medicine, and all of a sudden the words came out.